Good morning, everybody. It's your boy D Max. So let's talk. Forgive me for being a little bit late coming on. I was just going over some last minute notes because I wanted to go in depth a little bit about my topic, and I really wanted to give some understanding and break it down in layman's terms, so that we all can have a understanding of this concept in our law. And what I'm talking about is the presumption of innocence or guilt. And that's basically uh, the term innocent until proven guilty. We've all heard it many times before. It's been used in the court of law for many, many, many years. So this is an actual legal principle. Now, what is a legal principle? A legal principle is a general consensus based on basic society understandings. So you could say that society's narrative that they have on specific ethnic groups can influence a legal principle, and it can actually be part of the outcome in a determination in a legal case. So if your DNA and fingerprints are on the dead body, then we can pretty much conclude that you came in contact with the person that was hurt or injured or killed. That's the presumption of guilt. All right, this is just a basic understanding as a society as a whole. We can conclude that if we have that evidence, we have those facts. So, getting into this, it gets kind of tricky because there's a lot of things that should be done concerning the presumption of innocence and the presumption of guilt, innocent until proven guilty, that whole concept, but it is not exercised all the way across the board. It is used pretty much to be a tool of not influence, a tool of privilege among certain people, and that could be rich people. Oftentimes, one being Jeffrey Epstein. We saw after his death, when the story started to come out about how Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to do the things that he did, we found out that District Attorney Acosta uh, gave him basically a slap on the wrist. He did not make him charged as a sex offender. He made it seem like the girls were prostitutes, and Jeffrey Epstein was just charged for having sex with a prostitute. And he did allow Jeffrey Epstein to leave his jail cell and go to work in his office for at least 18 hours out of the day, and then he would just come and sleep in his cell, and that was considered his jail time. And this was all predicated upon his status in society and the amount of money and influence that he had within society circles. And so he was given the presumption of innocence all throughout, even though there was more than enough evidence and there was more than enough testimony to show that he was guilty. And they had to charge him with something. And so there was a gross neglect of the law, and there was a gross neglect of the system that we proclaim to be one of the greatest in the world. It was just negligence on every part to protect somebody who was rich. And so when it comes down to the presumption of innocence, it is based on your socioeconomic standing. It's based on who you know, what groups are you a part of, and all of these things play into the legal principle. So, how much weight should a legal principle really carry in a court case? This is not fair. This is based on society's opinion. And so, when you look at a case like Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion, which is going on right now. You have Megan Thee Stallion, who's been given all access to social media and media as a whole to explain her side of the story. And their explanation for that is because she's the plaintiff. She's the one who's making the charge against Tory Lanez, so she has that right. But if you're to understand that the three principles that the justice system should reflect are equality, fairness, and access, and that is predicated upon the presumption of innocence, where you're innocent until proven guilty, shouldn't Tory Lanez also be afforded the opportunity to tell his side of the story as well? But yet and still we see that he's in jail right now, or he probably bailed out by now, but he's been locked up for tweeting about the case. But yet Megan Thee Stallion was able to go on to Gayle King's show and talk about the case as freely as she wanted to. So this is a gross neglect of the presumption of innocence, this legal principle that they often use to determine the outcome of court cases. Do you see what's going on in our judicial system? Do you see why this needs to be talked about? You know, there's so many different legal principles that are overlooked and that are just grossly ignored and violated all the time. If you look at say for instance, separation of church and state. Now, what that is, you've probably heard that a lot of times, and what separation of church and state is, it's a legal principle where the government is prohibited from favoring one religion over another religion, or favoring religion over non-religion, period. So, the attack on Barack Obama's religious views, that went against the legal principle. That went against the legal principle of separation of church and state. So could he have sued based on this legal principle that was being grossly violated by many of the people in government at that time? Same thing with Mitt Romney. I believe Mitt Romney is a Mormon. He practiced the Mormon belief or something like that. I don't quote me on that, but I remember that there was a criticism and a critique of Mitt Romney's religious beliefs. And so many times through so many political campaigns have we seen where the person's religious beliefs have been called into question. Their background has been called into question. They accused Obama of being a terrorist. That was one of the main banners that they hung over Obama throughout his whole entire presidency. Oh, he's a secret terrorist. He's a covert terrorist, and all of these different things like this. Every president goes through their scrutiny, but whenever you call into question their religious beliefs, now you're starting to go against the Constitution, because the separation of church and state is a legal principle that is in the Constitution. And so when you see our country just grossly neglecting the Constitution constantly, and there's so many different parts of the Constitution that are being ignored and that are being violated and are just being pushed aside, what are we to say? This is the document that our country supposedly is founded on. This is what our morals and our values and our basic foundation was founded and built upon. So if that is no longer adhered to, why do we still use this as a legal document to determine cases and to argue cases in court? I don't understand it. There's no consistency in this. There's no balance in this. And this is why the judicial system is suffering. And this is why the people have lost faith in the judicial system. And so I hope I'm doing this I hope I'm doing this some justice. No pun intended. But I really want people to understand what we're facing on a daily basis, because a lot of times they can say something like, okay, well, he comes from a background, he comes from this neighborhood over here. It's in this zone in this district, which is known as uh, a problem area, a high crime area. And so he comes from a challenged background. And so we have to make this part of the determination when we rule on how many years to give this man in jail. Um, he's the probability of him getting back and returning to crime, being that he comes from a high crime area, is very high. And so we suggest that he be placed in custody and he does this amount of time, 15 years, as opposed to something else, because of his high probability of recidivism. And what recidivism is returning to jail. So these are determinations that are made in court, made between the prosecutor and the defending attorneys and the judges. And this is our lives that they're dealing with, and they're basing it off of basic public opinion. That's just how fragile and frail your case in court is. That's what it's hanging on. When you look at when they say stuff like Roe versus Wade and Brown versus whoever, all of these are cases that took place a long time ago, and these cases impacted public opinion, and it impacted society's understanding of how the social system works. This is all it is. It's an explanation of those things. And so when we continually go back, and there's nothing wrong with going back and reflecting on your past, because if you don't, then you are doomed to repeat the same mistakes. But to base your future off of the past solely, no, you can't do that. And because you don't know the heart of a person, you don't know what route life is going to take someone. I've seen so many people who I seen on a crash and burn course make a drastic turn for a better life. And then I've seen the flip side of that. I've seen people who have had a great life and who have had every opportunity afforded to them make a drastic turn for total destruction. And so you can't make determinations like that, because you cannot determine the heart and the spirit of a person, of an individual or a collective group. And so, the merit of these principles that we utilize in court, or that are utilized against us in court to back their claims, are not substantial enough to convict us, because you have what's called the equipoise rule. Now, this is going to play out in the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion's case, because the equipoise rule states that if you have two explanations that are backed by facts and circumstances, but these two explanations oppose each other, but they have the equal amount of validity, then that evidence does not fulfill, it don't fulfill the moral certainty to be able to make a fair judgment. And so you have Megan's side of the story, which has been had holes punched in it numerous times. You've had um the witnesses who stated different things. A lot of those things leaning towards Megan's friend, who's awfully quiet in this. And you have the side that explains or shows the fact that Tory didn't have anything to do with this, or he was there, but he was not the person to pull the trigger. He did not have the gunpowder on him. He did not have. He has testimony that says that the flashes of the gun were not near him. All of these different things, but both of them have opposing explanations that apparently backed enough by facts on both sides that that Tory wasn't locked up, and that's what made also reinforced a lot of people's belief that he wasn't guilty of this, because normally when you shoot somebody, you go to jail. Plain and simple. And you stay in jail until your court date. But for all of the stuff that has come out, all of the inconsistencies in one side, Tory sticking strong to his story, then it's going to come down to the equipoise rule. If one side cannot prove that the other is fraudulent or false. And so if there's not enough evidence to fulfill the moral certainty that one side is telling the truth, then what the determination going to be? It's going to be a hung jury. It's going to be, one of those cases like that. But the opinion of the public weighs more heavily than the opinion of the courts a lot of the times, especially when it comes down to entertainers. And you look at a lot of the people who have went through court cases and they've been proven innocent, but even though they were proven innocent in court, because so many people in society initially believed that about them, they still treat them as if they were guilty. We see this all the time. And so I don't know, man. I don't know. I just want people to understand, whenever you're calling somebody guilty or whenever you're making a determination on somebody's life or the quality of their life, then make sure that you are doing it properly and you're giving it the proper attention that it requires, because it is not a light thing that you're doing. These people who call themselves the cancel culture, all of you out here who feel like you have the power as a group to end somebody's career and to take their livelihood away from them because you feel like they've crossed some sort of boundary, then you have to be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that person did that. You know, that's just what it is. And whenever I meet people, that goes into just our everyday lives, because the presumption of innocence or guilt can come in the form of, say, I have a friend and we work on a job together. He's been working there before me, and when I come to work with him, he starts to tell me about people, and yeah, that dude right there, stay away from him because he blase blah. That girl right there, she's this and that. Well, if I make a assumption about these people based on my friend's interaction with them, then I'm going to be in error, because I don't get a first-hand witness or account of this person actually myself. I'm going off of somebody else's account, and they could have had issues with the person based on something that was wrong with them. and their perspective or their view of that person is negative because that person may have held them accountable. And so the view that they're going to give me is the view that they have because they were in the wrong and held accountable. So it's very tricky when it comes down to that type of thing. You have to consider the source, and you have to go forth and you have to make that determination based on your interaction with the person. So the presumption of innocence and the presumption of guilt is played out in our everyday lives. But when it gets to the judicial system, this is when it becomes more impactful, because this is the determination of somebody being free or somebody being in prison. This is the determination. Man, that's the tongue twist. I have a problem getting it out today. But this is the determination of whether a father is going to be in his child's life or a mother is going to be in their child's life, or uh, all of these things. A spouse is going to be taken away from somebody. This is when it becomes more impactful. This is when it gets real. And in everyday life, it causes issues and it causes uh, misunderstandings, but we can get past those things. But we have to understand this principle, and we have to understand how many different areas this principle covers. What I'm talking about is the presumption of innocence and the presumption of guilt. So I don't want to be on here too long. I pretty much ran out. I hope I did some justice to it. I hope people got to understand it. So whenever you look at these different court cases, you can look at it with a little bit more legal understanding based on the information that was given here today. So this is your boy D Mac, man. Y'all know what I say. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but the word can always heal you. I'm out.